Welcome back to season 3 of the Profit Power Hour, presented by Profit Coach. Great to have you all joining today for, man, I'm excited about today's session. Ray and I were talking back in Broker Owner a few months ago, and Ray, that conversation about maintenance and the potential around maintenance, the untapped potential around maintenance, was really the genesis of today's conversation. So folks, thanks for joining live here to talk about monetizing maintenance. Profit Power Hour, season 3, episode number 6. So glad to have you joining today. And as always, want to just hear where you're tuning in from. So jump into chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and then one fun thing you're going to do this summer. All right. One fun thing you're going to do this summer. Jay, Mike, Ray, jump into chat. Tell us one fun thing you're going to do this summer. All right. Well, we've got a fantastic lineup of panelists today. Ray Hespen, CEO, co-founder of Property Meld. Mike Schraepfer, President, Heirloom Property Management. And Jay Woodson, General Manager, Vice President of RPM Richmond Metro. Yours truly, Daniel Craig, author of the NARPM Accounting Standards, Chief Strategy Officer here at Profit Coach. And we help property managers expand their entrepreneurial freedom by building highly profitable, self-managing companies. Thanks, everybody, for joining in live. And Charles, I love that. You're going to learn how to hydrofoil. That definitely gets the most unique summer fun call out today. Checking out Niagara Falls for the first time. I love it. Attending a wedding in Chicago. Fantastic. You're going to beat Jay in golf, Ray. So
you said something interesting.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining in. And I'm going to go camping with these folks this summer. We're going to have a grand time. And we're going to try to keep the little one from eating dirt the whole 3 days. All right. If you've got questions, dump them into the Q&A box. That's a little bit different than the chat box. Q&A box I can manage a little more easily. Want to make sure we get those answered. And I would just encourage you to throw your worst and hardest maintenance-related questions at these gentlemen here today, because these guys bring the goods when it comes to maintenance experience. Talking about, again, monetizing maintenance. And as always, we want to help you move from financial fog to financial clarity, and specifically do that today in the area of maintenance. It's amazing to me how varied the perspectives on maintenance are. Like, you know, some people are like, oh, you don't do maintenance. Maintenance is the best thing. And I don't even do property management to make money. I just do property management to drive more maintenance volume. And then other people are like, oh man, maintenance, we just do it because we have to, right? So what do the numbers say? That's what we want to get into a little bit today, and help you ultimately move from just gut-based decision-making to predictable decisions, and ultimately leads you to benchmark success. All right. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Context for this conversation, Ray, I just kind of want to rewind the tape a little bit. We had this conversation around like, hey, the world of fee maxing is changing, and you know there is just search and resident junk fees. You're going to see all sorts of articles that apply not just to landlords but other industries as well. This is getting more attention. Who knows exactly what will happen in the long run, but here at Profit Coach, we are seeing some very specific changes happening to significant monetization strategies for our clients around government restrictions on fees. I would say one of the significant ones that's gotten a significant amount of scrutiny over the last year is, for example, your pet program. And the whole point of the conversation that I want to make here at the outset, and Ray, I'd like some of your feedback on this, is like, we have to make sure that we understand a proper distinction between value and fees. Both are appropriate. But value is different than your monetization strategy, right? Like, value is what you do, and monetization is your fee structure on how you actually drive revenue around what you do. And I think there's a certain extent to which maybe in the last several years in the property management space, monetization strategies perhaps in certain cases have gotten ahead of actual value creation in a way that is not going to be long-term sustainable. So Ray, like, what's your perspective, just high level, on why maintenance matters in the whole world of value creation and long-term financial monetization for property managers? Did I say Jay? I meant Ray.
So this mishap is going to be happening all webinar,
Yes.
by the way, Jay. So Daniel, I think one of the best things that you probably put out there is this concept of value and fees and like potentially outpacing each other. And one thing, when probably like 3 years ago, you started to have this concept of like just charge the resident. It's like they're a pocketbook that's sitting there. I was kind of consulting with some earlier startups that said, be very weary about that pocketbook because it's only going to be so long before the government comes in and regulates it, and you can't build your business on it. And the line actually is, would somebody pay for that as an option? Like, that's the difference between fees and value. So you have these things and you've seen these residence benefits packages and all that. And so if you're sitting there going, I'm going to just because I can, and I can make it a condition of the lease, if you cannot have a higher enough percentage of people actually want to pay for that service, that's probably where you cross the line from being in what is very defensible revenue versus a fee that could be regulated. And so obviously you pointed out the thing, the FTC did a notice out. They were taking comment on all these junk fees. And so they're going after everything from what things you can charge, but the states have been doing this for a while. So you've kind of been able to predict it out. But I think the big thing for residents, like, everybody has to understand the fiduciary responsibility in a lease is to maintain the property. And like, that's the baseline. You can't actually charge for it. You've got to legally. You can get sued for not doing it. And you guys who are in property management, Jay and Mike, if you punch me in the nose publicly and be like, Ray, you're an idiot, you absolutely can do some of that. But the thing that I've always found is, like, where you can find the free market value, where you can create value by efficiency, is really, really important. So I think, Jay, Mike, I'm not as super familiar with your organization. You probably do a lot of these things, just kind of getting to spend time with you in the past. But I think, like, if you think about maintenance, it's a business in itself where people are going out and doing work, and they're calling a plumbing company or whatever company to have all those inefficiencies. You can create free market value by making that better and capitalizing that income. You're driving the capitalism engine forward, reducing cost, improving experience, and finding ways to capture that. And so I think the fee thing has gotten a little heavy, and I think we're going to see some pretty serious repercussions of that in the next coming couple of years, probably. And so figuring out how you can sit there and go, would somebody pay for it?
Quick thoughts, Mike, Jay. What are your thoughts? Just the vendor in the room has opened his mouth. What about the PMs in the house?
I agree. I agree 100%. And we've seen the same thing that you all just mentioned. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Ray, is just making sure what are you charging the tenants for? Is there something there? Is there value there? And if you can articulate that to the tenant, then I think then you're covered for the most part. If you've got some fee in there, like you said, that the tenant looks at it and says, what am I paying for? That's not a good sign. So I think if you can really depict and articulate in the lease exactly what they're getting, and is it something that is of value that they can use, I think that will hold itself up.
Mike, any quick thoughts?
I'd agree with that. I think that the interesting thing is that maintenance and labor in general is so much less replaceable and so much more in demand. There's so many things out there that are trying to make property management more outsourceable, more simple, to kind of like replace part of the things that we have to do as a property manager. But maintenance is a very boots on the ground thing, and it's very demonstrable, the cost of it. And you can pretty easily line out like some competitors in the market that would charge the same amount for something or more or less, and really demonstrate the value of what's happening there, whether the cost is to a tenant or to an owner. So yeah.
Both. That's the cool thing about maintenance, is significant value creation opportunity for both sides of the equation. All right, so guys, we're going to dive in here, and the basic approach to this webinar is we're going to talk a little bit about maintenance structure, and then we're going to go and really going to focus not so much on like, hey, how many techs should you have, and how do you structure a maintenance operation functionally. We're going to talk mostly about monetization today, but to have a meaningful conversation around monetization, we really do need to talk maintenance structure. So got to pull up here. How do you currently handle maintenance? We outsource maintenance to third parties and do not do a markup. We outsource maintenance to third parties and we do have a markup or similar. I'm sorry, the first one was we do markup or charge an equivalent markup fee. Second one is we outsource and we do not markup. By the way, when I say equivalent fee, that could be like a vendor discount program, vendor marketing program, maintenance coordination fee, or just a simple percentage markup. Number three, we handle some maintenance requests in-house. And number four, we own a separate maintenance company. I'm going to start with you, Mike, on this. Where did you start? What's been your evolution around maintenance structure as it relates to PM?
Sure. I'd like to preface this with, so I've done a couple different presentations on this in the past, and I feel like after each one of them, I get the responses from both sides of the spectrum, where one side is like, that's gospel, that's exactly what we should do. And the other side is, that's completely crazy. You can't do that at all. And what I think the context of this question is, that needs to kind of put in there, is that people manage homes in Malibu, new construction, high value homes to, B class, C class, D class, and Cincinnati or something like that. And the maintenance operation for those businesses and all the businesses in between them is a bit of a spectrum, and it's varied a little bit. So I think that the approach to different types of PM businesses is probably a bit different. There isn't a blanket, which is why I think sometimes this answer isn't straightforward for each PM business.
Yeah. And so as that's helpful, but unpack that a little bit more. In other words, is the point that basically based off of the age and the needs of the home and the market, I mean, the needs of the maintenance operation are going to change. I get that, but like, how does that, aren't these still the options of how it gets handled? I mean, aren't you doing one of these four? Okay.
I think it was approaching more kind of like how you'd set up a maintenance business, but yeah,
I see.
We always mark up third-party vendors for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And did you start out like, so what's your migration? Like, did you start out just doing third party, outsourcing everything to third party, and then start bringing a lot in house? Because I know you guys do a lot in house. What's been your approach?
Yeah, we started a little unique where we had in-house people from the beginning because it was my background. But in hindsight, I wouldn't do that until, so I would qualify that with, I have an older market. The housing is older. So it's on its second or seventh remodel, not the first.
Okay.
And it's all like 100 years old, and it's a lot of like C, B class stuff, not a lot of A class. And so in that space, it's more tech heavy, it's more maintenance heavy. There's more maintenance dollars per number of doors kind of thing. So we needed to have a maintenance department sooner. There was more maintenance potential and volume there per door. And we started with technicians right away, but even in that context, I feel like it wasn't efficient until we got to about 400 doors to have in-house technicians. And before that, I would really kind of steer more towards sticking with vendors only. Yeah.
Okay. That's super, super helpful. Jay, how about for you? I know you joined RPM Metro specifically for the purpose of scaling the maintenance department. I think they had about 2 technicians when you joined. What's been the evolution though? Did you guys have a maintenance department all along? Third party?
We had a maintenance department. Yeah, actually, we only had one tech when I started there, and we predominantly we subbed everything out to third party vendors. And we focused heavily on the rebates and the markups. That's how we would make money off of maintenance. But I know we'll go into that a little bit more detail. But yes, similar to you, Mike, we kind of got to a point there. We had one tech that was kind of doing some side work, and then it got to a point where we started looking at the line items on the income statement, and we could see, okay, wow, we send a lot of this out to third party vendors. Is there any way we can capture any of that in house and drive our margins up a little bit? So we got to roughly around that 400 door mark, and then we added a tech, and then we kept looking through the line item on the income statement. And then we figured out we can add another tech here, and built it up from there.
Awesome. All right, we got some data up here on the screen, Ray. I'd like you have a kind of a broad scope view because you see a lot of different operations. But we've got roughly a third of the people on the call today. And I think the people on this, webcast definitely represent some of the more sophisticated operators in the industry. But roughly a third are not monetizing maintenance in terms of their property, in terms of a specific markup. They'd probably say, no, we monetize it through the management fee. But about, a third aren't doing anything. 40% handle some maintenance requests in-house. Only 7% have a separate, 17% have a separate maintenance company. So there's a wide, variety of approaches here. And I want you guys to just kind of big picture, like, what is there a right? Is there a wrong? How to think about what's the best approach in terms of like your specific goals as a PM? When is it better to outsource? When is it better to bring it in-house? Your thoughts, Ray?
So Jay, I learned a lot from Jay and his team. So he's a really good boots on the ground on how they've done things. And I've gotten to watch them scale it up, profitability and value creation that they've done. But I think you kind of had mentioned there's some broader data that I was able to see. And I had one of the biggest aha moments. It was a few weeks ago. I got the unique opportunity to see the data of a property management company that basically spun out and invested on maintenance on one portion of the portfolio, like where they're charging for it, they're making money. And then they have this uncharged, manage it the whatever way. And it's very rare. So the same sales process comes in, brings the door in, but it's like one is like the more invested in maintenance organization, and one is like, we're just going to handle it more a la carte. The interesting data point that I saw that should make everyone feel like this is probably the most important thing in the world is the fact that this blew my mind. The percentage of renewal of the renters in the maintenance managed department was up 11% off the average of the entire portfolio. So, and I don't know what the other side was. So, meaning it was probably a
11 points,
to 16,
Ray, or 11%.
11%.
Yeah.
Renewal rate, I think renewal rates are pretty commonly around 65, 67, 68% or something like that. It was like 75% or something like that. I forget the exact numbers, but I remember it was 11%. And I walked out of that meeting sitting there going like, do you want good maintenance or do you want cheap maintenance? And the reason why an investor might choose that, right, is anybody will pay any money, not any money, to get that lease renewed. And if I'm an investor and you can come back to me and be like, I can increase the likelihood of this or push out the turnover that you're inevitably going to have to do, all those costs, that lost rent. If I can have a professional group do this and they're paying for it, the value versus fees thing, all day. And so anyways, that was kind of an aha for me, and it mapped back in other metrics as well. Speed of repair, resident sat, everything else like that, where it's like, people who invest in maintenance are actually giving better returns to the investor outright. And then you can figure out profitability. But I think that whole component was kind of an aha moment for me.
Mike, what are your thoughts? Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead, Jay.
No, I was going to just comment on that. Actually, question for Ray, because we harp on that in our company quite a bit. It's the amount of money that an owner will lose when they have to go to market with a property, and then obviously the amount of money that they will save if they can just get that tenant to renew. I mean, we have our little bit of data just from our small group, but Ray, I'm sure you probably have some data on that could show on average when you go to when you have to take a property to market and not renew, those prices go up and the cost goes up. I don't know what that number is, but you were speaking of, and I think you're exactly right. If you can get your residents to renew, your owners are going to be way happier. They're going to spend way less money, not just on the fees to market the property, but anytime a new tenant comes in, they always find something. I don't care how new the property is. A new tenant is going to find some work order that needs to be done, and not just cosmetic. It's probably something small that may have been missed in a move in, move out situation. You're like, we really do need to fix this, per the lease. And so that's an additional cost that the owner will have to to take on. But yeah, the more we can get them to renew, it's a win-win for everybody.
So,
And then
I mean, Ray, I hear the point, maintenance matters. I think everybody on the call agrees with that. Are you saying that having an in-house maintenance operation is what's going to significantly drive up the experience such that that renewal rate goes up? Like, what's the point there in terms of how that impacts your choice around maintenance structure?
So property management exists by having investors give them rental units, right? So if you start there, and that's your opportunity to have recurring revenue from investors, that's maintenance, that's the management fee, everything. So the whole goal is to make sure that you keep that running, because that's what's going to allow you to grow your business. Peter Lohman does a great thing on like, how many investors are you going to churn? Well, how many are you going to sell? Like, I can tell you where you're going to cap out, right? You have to get investor churn under control. So then if you sit there and realize that that's the big thing, then you understand how does maintenance impact that, and should I invest in it or not?
I see.
And can you make that case? And so I guess I was kind of foundationally going, I have, not that I don't, I'm very biased, run a maintenance automation platform, but sitting there going like, yes, you should be able to do it. It's a fiduciary responsibility. It's efficient, blah, blah, blah. But now the closer you get to that investor return means that people should go, I'm going to invest in specializations. I'm going to hire techs. I'm going to invest in resources. I'm not going to go the cheap route, because if I go the cheap route, my ability to deliver that service is going to be problematic over here. And if it's not a potential revenue driver or profit driver of the organization, chances are it won't be that important either. So I was just kind of the bridging the back of the importance of it.
Mike, what are your thoughts on that? Do you I think that the point that we're discussing here is, to what extent does your ability to drive the maintenance experience and value in maintenance depend on having an in-house operation versus just subbing it all out to vendors a little bit more at arm's length? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm biased because I run a big maintenance business. I would have the little caveat though that I think that there's an inherent liability to working on a house when it's your team and your staff. You're the maintenance contractor, and I think circling back again to that spectrum of if you're a property management owner that has an RPU in the 300s, and you're probably on one of the coasts and you have all of your properties are $1 million homes, having some more specialized vendors and having a markup on that might be a safer, better way to go, especially if you're new and don't have a lot of maintenance acumen. There's just a little bit more trepidation to getting in and taking on the liability for touching that $1,000 sink versus the $100 sink. There is that. I think on the other side of it though, it is the whole game. There's no way to get to the RPU that you really need to have a nice sustainable business and provide the value these guys are talking about in the majority of the spectrum of the market, and especially in like the C-class side of things, without a profitable maintenance operation. So it's kind of necessity on one side. The other side, it could go either way. There's a little bit of risk to about there. Yeah.
All right. Let me throw some numbers at you guys. These are just quick high level from our last NARPM benchmark study, where we actually took a look at about 40 different maintenance companies across the industry. And what we're seeing as it relates to profitability, and again, we, for the purposes of this study, measured profitability against gross profit, because we're trying to normalize for people that did a certain amount of third party. But basically, for these operations, there is a massive spectrum of profitability, like -36 up to 34. Average is 2.5%. The point is, like, there's a lot of different ways to do maintenance. Okay, so there you go. Generally speaking, we think that companies that are running a profitable maintenance shop are going to be in the 20 to 25% range as a percent of gross profit. If we look at some of the drivers here, one of the interesting questions that comes up, Ray, you're going to love this, is maintenance profitability impact on churn? And the question that I think Cliff with GC Realty asked me this question. He said, hey, is there a correlation between if you really make a lot of money on maintenance and how much you actually lose in terms of investor churn? And here's the data. And basically, if you look at companies based off of this profitability scale, the lower profitability companies on average had significantly lower investor churn than the higher profitability companies. The companies that were driving the highest profits on maintenance had the highest churn rates. Now, does correlation equal causation? No, but this is the data is so clean that it's pretty interesting. The point is, it's possible to over monetize on anything, including maintenance. Ray, I know
I'll
you
tell
want
you-
to say something.
Oh my goodness, this is so good because like I have 19 other questions on this data. So I think your point is right. I'll tell you what, I've seen operators that regardless of how inefficient their technicians are, will bill out 100% of their hours.
Yeah.
Like there's always
Yes.
a billed hour for a technician. And so the thing that that average churn is actually, and we've got data to support this, it actually tends to correlate really well to two very particular things in maintenance. One of is average spend in maintenance as a percentage of rent roll. So Mike actually called it out really good, like about the class of property that is super important. Like, and we tend to see, we've got around on our platform now, probably around 450 to 500,000 investors on our platform. So we can actually see what sort of maintenance costs and experiences are they getting and how long are they with our customers. So there's some interesting stuff there. But one of the correlations is maintenance spend as a percentage of rent roll. So that means if you actually don't get more efficient in maintenance and you just charge more, you absolutely will have that outcome.
Yeah.
But there's a high degree of separation between maintenance throughput on companies too. And so the better segmentation that I would probably do is I would potentially look at layering in one more, because I'm curious, Daniel. So if you want to geek out and you've already got this data, I'd be very curious on the annual maintenance spend per unit in each one of those brackets. And so are they doing good at managing their vendors? Are they doing good at managing their technicians? And so if there's a correlation in there, I would totally go in with the churn, but that separating out the operators on what their throughput and their capability is on profit, excluding that, like in a like-for-like scenario of annual spend per maintenance per unit against their profitability, you get to find who's cranking it and driving retention at the same time. And so you're right though, Daniel, like just that, hey, I'm going to charge for every hour, or my billable rate on my techs is $150 an hour and I don't care, you know, whatever, you can absolutely drive the churn, and the data supports that.
Good feedback. All right, so let's talk a little bit about let's start diving into monetization. We've talked about maintenance structures, which structures work best and why. And maybe before we move on from that, just like high level, like Jay and Mike, from an operator's perspective, what would you, for people that are on the call, only, you know, roughly 17% of them have an in-house maintenance department. Like, so that's, you know, 83% that don't. This conversation is moving that direction. Like any just other guidance in terms of whether or not it's a good fit for them, how to evaluate whether or not they should start moving more maintenance in-house. You mentioned the doors, you mentioned the, you know, the type of the properties. Any other considerations on that?
Yeah, I think there's three pillars that we kind of, and Mike, I'm sure that you kind of look at it this way too. It is the reason that we brought most of our maintenance in-house, is you've got speed, quality, and price. And when we were subbing all of our work out to third-party vendors, we couldn't control all three of those for the owner. They were either going to get to it really quickly and they were going to charge us for it, or they're going to take a long time and the quality was good and charge for it. So we couldn't get all three of those. And that would, you know, kind of relate to the, you know, monetization of the maintenance department, and does that lead to churn? When we had just third-party vendors, we had a small amount that we could mark up, and by pushing and driving those numbers to get as much as we could, who was the one that was going to take on the brunt of that cost? And that's the owner. So we felt, hey, can we take this in-house, get some really qualified techs that can do things faster? We can control the speed, we can control the quality, and we can control the price. And now we can give the owner the best that we can possibly give them. So those, we kind of always look at those three things. How can we do this? If we can bring this in-house and we can hire some guys, or I'd say guys or girls, because we've got a couple ladies on our team too, then that's the best case scenario for the owner. And it's also the best case scenario for us, because now our margins are going to get a little wider than just, you know, a rebate from a vendor and then a markup. That's just what's worked for us. But to your point, Mike, every market is just a little different, and you may be in a market where, and we still use third-party vendors quite a bit for certain jobs. We don't want to take on that liability for, you know, a water main that needs to be replaced underground. We're not going to do that. We send that to the professionals, the licensed professionals that do that, and most owners are okay with that. They want that liability taken off of them and taken off of us and put on to that third-party vendor.
Mike, any additional thoughts on that? And maybe one thing I'd also like you to speak to is just like, is this decision partially determined by what kind of operator you are and the kind of style of business you want to run? Like, if you want to be, you know, working 2 hours a week, should you take on an in-house maintenance operation, right? Like, can you speak to some of that as well?
Sure. Yeah. I think that average you had of the average is 2% profitable. Kind of, it's like where property management was in 2017 when you did the first benchmark study.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done on how to do this right. And it is varied just as much as property management is varied across different kinds of markets and PM businesses. So to that point, if you really are trying to have a lifestyle business, don't have a lot of acumen around this stuff, don't have someone in your business that does, it may not be the right choice. May not be the best place to monetize. You might be able to get into something else. But if you're going this direction, I think that you're always going to have some vendors. You can't just do everything like you mentioned with the sewer line. It's kind of a 30-70, 70-30 split. Start with probably something that you're most comfortable with as far as what you start taking on in-house. And I think within technicians, there's a couple different ways you can go. This environment is so price sensitive, like that first slide you had with the investors and the churn, that we're really price sensitive on how much we charge, and so therefore how much we pay. And that can lead us towards technicians that I would say are not what I'd call a lead tech. And a lead tech is a person that can do the work and actually literally write the description and could send the invoice themselves. You probably don't want them saying the invoice, but they write the problem, they write the solution, and that is at a customer facing quality. And
you say lead tech or elite tech?
I call them lead tech. That's like what they would call it in like union training if they were training a plumber. Or HVAC tech or something like that. Most of those kind of trades, the technician is writing the actual response and solution, and that's billable. You know, because of the pricing pressure, I see a lot of technicians that are jack of all trades stuff, and they need a remote person or a coordinator reviewing that and rewriting it to make it customer facing. There's a lot of touching on hundreds of invoices that come in per week, and that can get kind of messy. And so I think if you're new to this, I would definitely lean towards finding a really, really strong technician that can really carry some of the expertise in that. And if you do have a lot of expertise in maintenance, have someone that knows a bit about a lot of things in your shop, then you could maybe go towards a couple people that are a little more affordable because you have the ability to review their work, their notes, and make sure that there isn't a lot of, you know, you're not, like Ray mentioned, you're not building something too facetiously that shouldn't cost that much or doesn't have a good description. The value, a lot of times the owner never sees the work, doesn't pick the vendor, and so the value a lot of times is in the communication. And if the communication isn't there, the value isn't there a lot of times. So that's kind of my take on getting into it.
That's super helpful. And if you get that lead tech starting out, that can create a little bit more of a self-managed operation that allows you to ease into it a little bit more easily.
I think so. It allows you to kind of manage the coordination side, stuff that you're probably already pretty good at, and you know that the work is to a little higher quality and the solution is correct, even if you don't have the technical expertise to talk to it exactly.
One question that just came up here. How do you actually get owners to understand the cost and value of maintenance? I would imagine that a lot of the experience that the owner has around what you're billing is the communication that happens around that. Any quick best practices, Jay and Mike, around effective communication of value in the maintenance process?
We have a quick thing that we do. So a lot of our common things, we will have we basically pre-go out and have the 3 bids kind of thing. So we know in our market what this contractor, and this contractor charges for an HVAC install or a toilet replacement. And we kind of have a 1-page cheat sheet of that. And we want to make sure that we're capturing as much value as we can, but at the same time, with our charge rates, but then also providing value at the same time. So we're never over market. And we want to, and that seems to communicate the value really well. When they don't see the work and they didn't choose when it happened, they're relying on us to make those calls, knowing that we're in line with the market and with real vendors in our community. That helps a lot.
Nice. Jay, you were gonna say?
No, you took the words out of my mouth, Mike. We do the same thing. We just basically take the work that we've contracted out to our third-party vendors, and we have no problem showing an owner, hey, this is the going rate for a HVAC change out. We just had three bids this week. This is the cost. We can do it in-house for this price. There's the value. And not only that, but again, you mentioned that the communication, explaining to the owner what the problem was, what the solution is, what are we doing to fix it, and giving them the detail of the work. I hate to say more words means more work, but in a way, we've got a tech who's great with appliances. He's not great in terms of filling out his description of the work order. And we have to kind of coach him through that. The guy can go and fix a washer, a dishwasher, and a refrigerator in 2 hours, and he'll fixed all 3 appliances, and he's in and out in an hour. And I'm like, wait a second. It's like, you did way more work there. We just need to know what that work is so we can explain that to the owner so they can see the value. Because sometimes, again, if they look at their owner statement and it just says fixed dishwasher, I mean, sometimes they look and like, oh, what did you do? Like, I don't see that you did anything. But if you really go into the detail and explain the part that was missing and the part that was fixed, again, you can see that value. So a lot of it just lies in the communication and having somebody that can articulate that to an owner, so they really feel like, hey, I got my money's worth on this job.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, and so Jay, again, Jay, you and I spent time just to understand. You guys are doing some very intelligent things about job pricing, job costing to kind of get ahead of that. One of the things that we're seeing like pretty heavily in the industry right now is like just the belief and trust in modern pricing versus like even 2 to 3 years ago is like so drastically different that people are like, yeah, I get it. But even in the data that we have, I think over the last 3 years, like HVAC costs have went up by like 41 or 43%. It's pretty asinine. And so one of the things that we're seeing used more is we've got a bunch of these insights products that tell people how they're doing, but the number one to communicate with investors is the benchmarking of invoice prices. And like being able to say, this isn't my data. Like, I'm not trying to be the person, and like, I'm not just the man behind the curtain. But here's what the market is based on what a lot of other maintenance costs are running. And we're right in market. And so I think like having more and more ammunition that's behind the why in the number, we're seeing a lot more do, especially as like everybody right now, as rents are starting to compress, everybody or, hold or compress or just not go out like they were. Everybody's starting to go, rent's not going to make up my maintenance cost increases anymore. And so they're starting to get way more picky at those things. And so having some of that benchmarking stuff and being able to press in front of somebody has become like a really good tactic we've seen as part of that communication strength.
I have one silly mnemonic that we've used that's been like sneaky good, and that is, so again, like the owner doesn't have agency, the call comes into us, we fix it and we choose what we do and then send them a bill. So that communication is critical, and that like technician that says fixed it, that only flies if it's like super cheap. Otherwise that's not enough, no matter what the repair was and how well it was fixed. And so we have a mnemonic that's $100 per, I want a sentence per $100. So, or a sentence per hour, like, which is a simple thing. Like, what do you do for the hour? You should be able to say one thing that per hour.
I like that.
And each hour is roughly about $100. So if you're there for 3 hours, I need 3 sentences about what you did.
Yeah.
That's
fair.
Awesome, Mike. I love that so much. A sentence per hour. I like the sentence per dollar amount too. Be like, well, this air conditioner was really old and we went through it. Like,
and that's literally what we have a remote person do. Our remote person is looking at the invoices and like, oh, this is $740. I don't see 7 sentences. I'm pushing it back to the tech to get more information.
Yeah.
and it just looks like value. That's the value. So
You're
So
before
good.
you know it, Mike, your texts are going to get really good at using periods. So,
This
all
is how
right.
you drive ChatGPT adoption by Mike.
Exactly. All right, I love this. All right, that's fantastic thoughts on high level structures, monetization, guys. We're going to get into some turnkey maintenance projects and how that can actually drive a unique level of revenue and profit. Mike's going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk a little bit about scaling a maintenance operation as well. We already talked about these structures, but just high level, some non-monetary considerations that are being talked about here. Summary: control of the owner-resident experience. Guys, thoughts on hiring techs and managing techs versus hiring, recruiting, and managing vendors. That's, I think that's an important consideration here. Like, what's harder in your experience?
we've had some
You
really
know,
good.
go for it, Mike. Go for it.
So we utilized we're in Minnesota, and our state has I think every state probably out there. Facebook groups are a really big thing. There's a Facebook group for everything now. There's a Facebook group in our in the state of Minnesota it's called subcontractors, like Minnesota. And we have had really good luck on there with some of our trades. It really helps in the turnover space, like painting, flooring, siding and roofing, things that we don't want our technicians doing. Learn that a maintenance technician, if they get parked on a job for a couple of days, almost always doesn't provide value. They're better at the kind of the turn and burn kind of thing, and also the charge rate we need to charge for that. You can usually find vendors and have a markup on it, but it's still way more affordable for the owner and way more controllable to have a vendor on some of those things that take more than a day. And with, I think, Facebook market groups or Facebook groups, it's really easy to throw a post out saying I'm looking for someone to do a roof in this city, and you'll get a bunch of responses. And you can start to find vendors that way. And in 6 months of doing that, we found a handful of vendors that we do a lot of repeat work with, that we like working with. And they were all people that we would have never found. The best vendors are not vendors that are in the phone book. They're vendors that are on the affordable side of stuff. They would call themselves a subcontractor. They generally don't really market their business name much, and they stay busy by keeping affordable and keeping busy. So
I love it. So as the question here is a little bit more of, or the answer is a little bit more of, techs for certain faster jobs, other vendors for more than a day. Jay, your thoughts?
Yeah, we do have some projects that we do, and it's a little bit tougher for us to have our internal team, make these projects profitable and still give the owners a good price. So you're right, Mike. If it's something that's really big, that's going to take, a week or longer, then we will look to find a vendor. And there's some line items that we just can't compete with. Like you mentioned, flooring, and sometimes painting. Some of the flooring vendors that we have in Central Virginia, they're just so quick and so fast and so cheap. Like, we can't compete. And I don't want to give an owner a quote for our guys to go out and try to make it profitable for us, and overcharge them. So there are some vendors that we need to have. But in terms of your question, would you rather hire or manage techs or vendors? We obviously do both. We need to do both. And we've got and we're in a scaled up to a position now that we can have this person in place, but we have a director of vendor relations. So they're in charge of hiring all of our vendors, are agreeing to, we've got a preferred vendor setup that we have where we work out rebates and markups and things like that. But they manage that relationship because they're ever fluid. We've got some great vendors that work with us for 5, 6, 7 years, and others that they come in for a year, they get too big and they move on. But it's a healthy balance. We need both. So I think it's tough to manage the vendors in the sense that you want to keep them on board, keep the work coming to them. That's what keeps them there. And then for the in-house team, it is tough to manage an in-house team when it grows to a certain amount, because you have to have, somebody's got to be watching, every little move that they make to make sure that they're not, obviously wasting time and they're billing, appropriately and so forth. So it's a good blend, in my opinion. I mean, there's some areas where third-party vendors is the only way to go for them, and that's fine. But we have to do a little bit of both.
Awesome.
Would you mind if I jump in, Daniel?
I do, but let me just promo this
Okay.
fantastic ebook
This is great.
from Property Meld, Maximizing Owner Retention While Maximizing Profitability. If this would be helpful, just say yes, and the folks over at Meld will send this out to you. Go ahead, Ray.
It's very important. Participate in that one. No. So I think the interesting thing is Mike and Jay have kind of both alluded to, you know, unless you're running like super A-class properties, like bringing in maintenance is an ability to bring in a revenue stream, profitability. The challenge is, if you look at like the data, 50% of the work requests tend to happen in about 4 months of the year. And so what ends up happening is you have a very interesting supply variation. And this is why like some of these people multifamily have super high internal technicians and they're starting to look more vendors. And then you have, you know, a lot of the single family that are having great conversations like Jay and Mike of like bringing somebody in, but it's not like this absolute binary because of that one specific thing. Because the reality is, if we know how hard techs are to hire, and we know how difficult it is, like the ability to create level load work for those teams to keep going and allow great vendors to kind of fill in the hot spots, whether it be like high, you know, intimate work or whatever, it becomes a game where you're probably never going to get one or the other because it's not optimized until the load optimizes. So we tend to see like, there's a metric that we track of internal versus external. It's very rare outside of multifamily with on-site operations. It's very rare that we see anybody doing more than 70% of the work internally on an annualized basis, I think because of that. Because if not, you end up sitting there going, either I got to saddle the costs internally and lose money, or I got to bill my investor a ton of money for work that a technician's not able to do. And both of those are really dangerous to a business.
Awesome. All right. We are going to talk a little bit more about maintenance monetization here, and different monetization approaches for straight third party, owning your own maintenance company. But I just want to get a little audience feedback here as well. So I'm going to launch this poll. How do you, what's the, hold this question up. In your opinion, so this isn't what you do. This is, in your opinion, what's the best way to monetize maintenance? Third-party vendors with no markup, third-party vendors with a markup or equivalent markup fee, internal maintenance technicians, a combination of third-party with markup and internal technicians. I think those are pretty much the options. Maybe you don't mark up third-party in every case if you have an internal operation, but love to hear what you believe is the best way to monetize regardless of what you're doing today. All right, while that data comes in, let's just talk through this a little bit. I'm just going to go through this high level. Here's what I've seen having coached here at Profit Coach, many companies across the industry. If you're doing straight third party, I would say probably the most common approach is a 10 to 15% markup. One of the things that we've seen quite a bit more over the last several years is a flat coordination fee. I'm personally, if you're doing all third party and you're running it through and you don't have a separate maintenance brand, then I'm a huge fan of the flat coordination fee. And the reason for that is because I feel like the percent markup creates a bit of dissonance and misalignment in the owner relationship because they perceive you as being incentivized to get the highest price vendor. Whereas if you do a flat coordination fee, the pitch is, hey, this is what you pay us to find the best vendor at the best price to get the job done the fastest. So I'm a huge fan of the flat coordination fee. I think it sells really well. Then another common one is vendor discount or marketing program. This is either where you have basically you have the vendor kick back to you a certain percent of the work they do as a result of the fact that you're basically doing lead generation for their company. And typically those percentages are in the 5 to 10%. If you're doing all third party, but you're running it through a different brand, what we commonly see is an ability in some cases to actually charge a higher markup because what's going on here is you're actually rebranding all the invoices through the third-party maintenance company that is a different brand in your property management company, but it's also the owner's also not getting an invoice from a ABC plumbing with a markup that's visible. It's all baked into the invoice and from your third-party maintenance company, and so, or from your separate maintenance company. And so in some cases we see those markups going up higher to as much as 20%. And then obviously, monetization on your own technicians. I'm interested in what all of you guys think on all of this, but generally speaking, kind of want to target somewhere in the neighborhood of 3x your hourly rate for hourly billing. In other words, if you're charging, if you have a maintenance tech that is costing you $30 an hour, probably going to bill them out somewhere in the range of $90 an hour. That's high level. Jay, Mike, Ray, your thoughts on monetization strategies and what I have up on the screen here.
Yeah, I'll dive in. I can touch on all three of those at the top there with the percent markup. I agree with you. We actually have a percent markup. That's what we've had on all of our PMAs, for the last, 8, 9, 10 years. So that's just where we are. We've got a separate company, another office that we charge the flat coordination fee. So I think you're right. It does create a little bit of tension with an owner when they see that markup. They think, oh, we're incentivized to bid more work. So what we end up doing to help with that, if it's a bigger project, we end up backing off of that percentage markup, which in turn almost makes it a flat coordination fee. So if we just stuck with the flat coordination fee from the beginning, it probably would be a little easier. And that's something that we're looking at to see if we want to change for our main office here in Richmond. But a great example of that, always when people ask about doing the flat coordination fee, let's say you have 200 doors, and if you do the math, let's just say you average 8 work orders per door. That gives you 1,600 completed work orders throughout the year. If your coordination fee is $35, now you've got $56,000 of profit there. Then you can just compare that to who you have coordinating the maintenance. What is your maintenance cost to coordinate that maintenance? And if you've got a remote team member that costs you X amount, half the amount, now that flat coordination fee makes sense. I've only got 200 doors. I've got one remote team member that handles maintenance coordination, and I've got the flat market or the flat coordination fee. Then it makes sense. And I agree with you. I think it's a good way to go. But for those of you who have the percentage markup, I know for us, we have you talked about the vendor discount. We really work to get a preferred vendor agreement when we bring on these new vendors. And for, like you said, for this basically marketing their company to the tenants, to the owners, but also we're going to give them a lot of work in lieu of them coming on with us and giving us that rebate. So in the past, we would try to spread that. We'd have the rebate, then we would mark up to the owner. But we felt like we were doing the owners a disservice, because all the vendors would do would mark their bill up 10% to account for the rebate. So we ended up we like to pass the vendor discount on to the owner and then mark up from there to try to balance it out a little bit. But the flat coordination fee, I agree. When we started these other two offices, that's the route we've taken, and it seems to have worked really well. It's very simple, and I think it creates a little bit more trust with the owner, knowing that, hey, I know what this is going to cost me every single time a work order comes through, and I don't have to worry about the price of the percentage of the markup.
Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I feel just exactly what Jay said.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about internally, Mike, with third-party markup with vendors. Let's stick with markup. What is the markup percentage that you're targeting for third-party vendors internally?
So we kind of have a little bit of a spectrum of it. Our starting point is 43% markup to net a 30% margin. And that goes down a little bit with licensed trades, just because there's a little compression in the spectrum of pricing there. And a big part of that for us is understanding that you can find someone to do a repaint for $1,000 or $3,000, and market is probably around like $2,500. There's always some people over market. $2,500 is kind of a fair price to repaint this thing. And our job, a lot of times when we're finding vendors, is we earn some of our value by doing that sourcing, building those relationships. We want to capture some of that. And so I feel like you have to have a healthy margin on that. You're also taking on some of the liability when you repackage that and put that on your own invoice. And so you have to fix it. You have to follow up if something doesn't go right. And so it can't be a really thin margin or markup. So that's really where we shoot.
What was the number again where you're shooting?
43 for unlicensed trades, 43% margin markup, which makes a 30% margin. We've been able to do that pretty well on a lot of the larger trades like roofing, siding, windows, painting, flooring, things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I
Let's,
can I jump in one thing,
yeah, please.
Daniel? You're gonna
Please,
hate
Ray.
me. Sorry. I think the interesting thing about maintenance, by the way, or the hard thing is like, how do we tie in metrics around investor retention in relation to maintenance performance too? I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I think we've seen. How do you do both really well? Because really a very successful maintenance company is creating renewed leases, investors that renew, all that sort of stuff. And so you can have a maintenance company that's printing money, kind of as the data showed. And so I don't know how you answer that, Daniel, but I think that'd be an interesting one for the group on how Jay and Mike do that, or how you guys kind of think about that. It's a big looming question because we just keep talking about profitability, but that one graph that you showed is kind of like, well, but how do I do that without sacrificing the golden goose, right?
Right. Let's
Yeah.
come back to that in just a second as we wrap up. I'll give you guys a chance to speak to that. Want to just basically give you guys, if you're thinking about moving towards third party, internal maintenance technicians, the benchmark based off of our last study is a 2.73 labor efficiency, which again is you're getting somewhere between, right around $2.73 of revenue for every dollar you spend on payroll. And so basically what that means is you're going to have to charge a different multiple times your hourly rate based off of what utilization you're at. Okay. So what that would, in order to achieve a net 2.73 labor efficiency, if you can hit 90% utilization, then you need to charge 3x times the hourly cost of your technician. If you're only going to hit 80% utilization, then you need to charge 3.4 times your hourly cost. If you're only going to hit 70% utilization, you need to basically charge 4 times your hourly cost. So this is really significant because utilization of your technicians has a huge impact on bottom line labor efficiency and the kind of multiple that you're going to have to charge times the cost of your maintenance technicians. All right. Next steps. We're going to just talk a little bit more right at the end here about scaling a maintenance operation. But in terms of some next steps, where do you stand? Get the NARPM benchmarks guide specifically related to maintenance metrics. You can get some good insight from that document. You can get that at narpm.org. And at the end of the day, define your optimal monetization structure. What's going to be the best fit based off of what we've discussed. And as you move into internal, define your labor efficiency target, define your utilization target, and that'll put you well on your way to having a model for what you need to achieve in terms of the operations of the maintenance company to run a profitable shop. In addition to that, we'd like to help you figure out what's your specific best opportunity for monetizing maintenance. And so if you'd like to schedule a maintenance monetization strategy session with our team, we'd love to help you discover how your maintenance operation currently stacks up to the NARPM maintenance benchmarks, help you understand your maintenance profit potential, and then help you big picture define 2 to 3 next steps that you need to take to add $50,000 to $100,000 to your bottom line annually through maintenance or through other means. So if that's of interest to you, then just go ahead and I'll put up a poll here and you guys can give us just a quick yes. Hey, I'd like to jump on a call with you guys. Essentially, just send us your P&L. We'll do some analysis. We'll walk through these items with you, totally free, and we'd be happy to help you get some actionable advice out of a little bit of a deeper dive into what your numbers are saying about your opportunity. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about scaling and just, Jay, a little bit of your story on how you went from 2 technicians to $3 million in revenue today.
Yeah, I mean that's an important part, and you, Ray touched on it. You touched on it. You've got to make sure that if you're hiring or bringing on a new tech, you've got to make sure that you've got the workload to keep them busy. So you don't want to hire a tech to do appliance work, and you're only getting 50 work tickets a year. They're going to be sitting around a lot, and you're not going to really be profitable doing that. So you're going to be spending more money than you're making. So I think the biggest thing for us, and I kind of hit on it earlier, we just really dig into the line items on our income statement. Where are we spending the most money in maintenance? And then how many work tickets are we getting with those? So if I can justify, X amount of tickets, and then there's X amount of revenue, and I know what the cost is going to be for this technician, not just their payroll dollars, everything that goes into it, whether we're increasing insurance, truck costs, gas, everything that it takes to have that employee. I take that number, look at what the potential is, how many work tickets can we have, and then I say, or not just me, our team, I got a lot of smart people that know more than I do. We say it's time to hire a new person for this position. We just hired an HVAC technician. It took us a year to find one. But it's a huge profit margins for us to have an internal, master HVAC technician. But that's the gist for us. We just slowly just look at the line. Wow, we're sending a lot of paint, to third-party vendors. Can we bring this in-house? Cleaning, we send a lot out. Can we bring this in-house? And obviously HVAC was the big one, but tough to hire because they demand a lot of pay, a lot of hourly pay there. So it's tough for us to find the right person. But we did that over and over, rinse and repeat until we get to a point where we've got all these techs. They've got a full workload, which is the biggest thing. We don't want guys sitting around. We want the trucks moving. So that was the biggest part for us. So we're up to 10 techs now. And I know, Mike, you've got a dozen, if not more, up there. So I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what your strategy was as well, getting into that. But that's kind of what's worked for us.
Go for it, Mike.
Yeah, I heard a really interesting kind of like layout of this from a different property manager, and it was one of the larger operations that is a roll up, and they talked about how they would do at basically 400 units, they would get a technician that was really strong in plumbing, and at 600 units they'd add one that was really strong in electrical, and at 800 units they'd add on the HVAC one. And that made a lot of sense. I compared that to our business, and it's about exactly what we had done without really knowing that we did that. So that matched up really well. And so I think getting started, it's finding a few strong technicians that you can lean on for a lot of different things that have good communication skills, and then assessing your management team and how well that's working. And then from there, seems to be plumbing, electrical, HVAC in that order, as far as plumbing repair, electrical repair, and HVAC repair. And I don't know if that's an ease of finding them or in demand load, but that matched up in our market pretty well.
Awesome. And then just as we wrap up here, talk for just a second, Mike, about turnkey opportunities, big projects, getting houses flipped for investors. What's been the opportunity there for you?
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of that, a couple $1 million a year. And we've gone back and forth with that. I think that's a little more fickle because like this last year, I feel like we've had a lot fewer of those projects. But for many years, we had quite a few of them. It was really helpful in like a C-class type market like we have, that's also older. Almost every onboard came with a project, and it actually made landing clients a little easier if we could handle that as well. It was an easy sell then. We'll do the remodel and then manage it. And they really needed someone to do the remodel. So then we easily won the management. And there was a lot of demand for kind of fixing some things up. A lot of investors bought things that were good buys that needed a little bit of work, and being able to help with that was a big part of growth. As far as profitability, it's a challenging one. It's like Jade mentioned, you really need someone watching a project every day when you have people on site, more than a one-day project, let alone like multi-month projects. Labor can run away really fast. So it takes a lot of project management, and that project manager is the critical thing there to if that's going to be profitable or not.
Got a couple of quick questions, guys, and then we'll wrap up. how many techs per number of units? Is it one tech for every 150 units, or roughly what's a good rule of thumb there? And it probably, again, it's going to depend widely on the makeup of your portfolio.
Yeah, we've got 10 techs, and we've got 1,400 doors, 1,450 doors. So that would be, one per 140. But again, I think more importantly, it's where's the work. If you've got 1,000 doors and you've got a lot of work and you can do it in house and keep people busy, then maybe it's one per 100, maybe it's one per 200. So I think more importantly, I know that's a good rule of thumb to look at it, but more importantly, can you keep the techs busy throughout the year? I think is more important than just a simple number per door.
Yeah.
Mike, one question. Sorry, you were going to comment on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if your market's largely homes that are built after 1980, it's very, very different than if they're built, a lot older than that. There's just way more maintenance demand in older markets versus kind of newer markets. And it seems like that's kind of a bright line a little bit. You're either in a suburb of a new city and there's a lot of that, or it's older stuff. So
Mike, one question that came up, I'll have you answer from Thomas. When you have a technician, I understand it's common to do a 3x times your hourly labor, but what about materials? Is there not a good opportunity to mark up materials as well? How do you think about that?
huge. Yeah. So without talking too much, so I feel like the price sensitivity in this space is all about the hourly rate. That's the signpost item. That's the one that's going to get scrutinized. That's the first question. How much do you charge per hour? And so if you need to make 3x or whatever to hit your margins, I think the hourly rate usually gets a bit of a haircut. So if you're paying a guy 35 an hour, it's hard to and you can't charge 105 for it. Maybe you can charge 90 for it. But you can make some of that back up in a 1 hour minimum fee and a consumable fee. Maybe we do a couple % for that. And
what's the consumable fee?
We charge 3%. So just for screws and nails and all the stuff in the van. And then also having a markup on some of the materials. And again, there's value in that. We've done a good job sourcing that stuff. We could not mark up the materials and just buy whatever's clever, but it's probably going to cost them more in the long run than us putting out energy into a lot of the materials that we buy. So
just since we are talking about monetization, any other revenue drivers that have been helpful for you? You mentioned the consumable fee. I guess that's 3% on the total of the invoice, Mike.
Yep.
Then what's your target markup on the materials?
We shoot for around 30%.
Yeah, 30%. You mentioned a 1 hour minimum. Any other kind of trip fees or anything else that you guys have found to be successful in terms of additional monetization opportunities?
Sure. One of the things I've found is the material markup is really, really easy and benign on small items. It's when items get to be over a couple $100. Appliances is a big one. Appliances are a well-known price by most people because they're on the front page of every do-it-yourself store's ads. And so there are areas where you can't have the same markup.
Yeah.
It's more the small little tickets, but it adds up a little bit.
Yeah. How about for you guys, Jay? Any other monetization things that have been key for you?
Yeah, we've seen, Ray mentioned this earlier with the squeeze and rental rates and lack of rental increase, that's being turned to maintenance. So we've seen a lot of owners, we'll go out and we've got some guys that work for us, and they'll go get some pretty detailed quotes together for a 2-3 day job if they want to redo a bathroom or something like that. And then they go spend probably 2 or 3 hours on it of their own time, which, we don't ask them to do, but they want to do a good job. And we go give it to the owner, and the owner says, I'll get my next door neighbor to do it. So we'll charge a quote fee for bigger projects. If it's something small and we go take a look at it, it's not a big deal. But when they really want to shop it around, we've instilled that quote fee and we put it on the disclaimer when we send it out to them, just say, hey, if you want, if this is not approved, you could be subject to, a quote fee for getting this all together. So that's one way. Just we want the owners to let us do the work for them. It's easier for us. It's going to get done correctly. We're in the know. We know what's done and how well it's done, rather than them do it themselves. It's hard for us to keep up with it and see the quality of the work. So,
all right, great stuff, guys. Final thoughts as we wrap up today. Really appreciate your time. Jay, I'll start with you.
No, I think, this has been a fun project for us here in Richmond to try to, again, our goal is to make the maintenance profitable, but again, we've talked about this, not at the expense of an owner and them wanting to kind of renew their yearly contract with us and to stay with us. We want this to be a good experience. Our motto is to take the stress off of the owner, and one of those being maintenance. I'm sure that you guys have all felt the same way. So our goal is really to try to do everything we can to make it profitable, but more importantly is to make our owners happy and to make sure they feel like, that we're doing best by them and managing their property the correct way and saving the money where we can.
It's awesome. A little question that just came in here. What was that quote fee, Jay? How do you price that?
The quote fee,
Yeah.
it's our hourly trip fee. So it's just an
Okay.
hourly charge. So we don't go crazy with it. It's just a very simple 1 hour. Whatever your 1 hour fee is, that's what we charge. Even though sometimes it takes them longer to get those quotes together. Like I said, it's just a way. It's just more of a deterrent to let them say, hey, you can take care of it. You guys just do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
We have two really good things that we really get out of maintenance that drive value. I think that I valued since we got into it. It wasn't the initial focus, but in the end, it adds a lot of value. So one, with these 10, 12 technicians crawling all over these houses all the time, for the 97% of tenants that pay the rent on time, this is the person they have the most interaction with.
Yeah.
And so we actually generate a lot of Google reviews through our technicians. And there's a lot of experience of our management company via our technicians with our tenants. So we really actually try to spin that around as a positive and talk with our technicians a lot about how to make that a great experience. And that's really driven our property management experience with tenants quite a bit, which was an interesting thing that we have control over and we can actually impact. The second one was getting preventative on the house. So a lot of these technicians are pretty sharp people, and if they see a shingle in the yard when they're walking up to go, fix the thing in the house, they back up and go look at the roof and see that a shingle blew off the roof in the last whatever, and they share that proactive preventative type stuff coming from us to the owner versus always catching, but in making more aware of like, hey, while I was there looking at this, I saw this and we should probably fix it, or we should fix it at some point. You should let the owner know that they should get that on their list. That kind of stuff really puts deposits in the trust bank of like the relationship with the owner and makes your in-house operation really valuable.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. Up next, Wednesday, July 24th at 12 p.m., episode 7 of the 24 Profit Power Hour series. And thank you, everybody, for taking time to tune in today. I appreciate you taking an hour of your lunchtime to be with us. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ray, who left early. Everybody, have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks.